I became an architect by accident. I didn't know such a thing existed as architecture. I'd never heard the word, never knew Frank Lloyd Wright or Le Corbusier. I went to Cornell University. I was studying science, hated it. But in my dormitory where I lived, there was a senior person who was in charge of all the young people, and he was an architect student. And I used to see that he would make models and drawings late at night, and I'd say, could I help him? And I would go down, because I always loved to draw and make models when I was a kid, but kids, boys in growing up in the 40s in the United States didn't do this sort of thing, didn't do art or drawing. They did auto mechanics and shop and things like this. And so I really said, can you go and study this at the university? So they said, yeah. I went home, Easter vacation. I waited till the last day of Easter vacation. I said to my parents, I have something to tell you. And we gathered in our living room, a very formal place. And I said, I'm going to become an architect. And they looked absolutely horrified. The first thing my father said, is this another one of your jokes? I said, no, I'm serious. I found something I wanted to do. And that's how it happened. I never looked back.
So do you still draw or sometimes build models yourself?
I don't build models, but I do draw all the time. I'm always doodling and sketching, whether I'm in a restaurant, whether I'm at my desk, I'm in an airplane. I doodle a lot, which is part of my design process, by the way. So, yeah, I draw.
What does your work process look like? How do you design?
Well, first of all, we set up a series of ideas that I'm interested in. Doesn't depend on the project or the site or the whatever. Depends on the kinds of things that I want to think about and work at, so that all of my projects are part of a process of thought that I'm involved in. Whether it's teaching, whether it's writing, whether it's projects, it's all the same for me. And then I have a team of people, and I say, okay, 5 people, here's the idea, show me 5 different solutions, 5 different diagrams, if you will, of what are possible. That's what we're going to be doing with this model that you see over there. And so I look and I say, okay, let's choose this diagram. And then I say, let's try 5 different ways of deploying this diagram on this site with this program. And then we do that. And it's a process in a sense both of reduction and opening up to things that I wouldn't think of ordinarily. In other words, I don't go in with an a priori idea of what the building will look like, what the building should be. I think about ideas that relate to the diagrams that we produce and things that I'm interested in exploring. So I never have an a priori idea other than of the form. I have an a priori idea. What form it'll take comes out of the diagrams.
You are using diagrams to obscure the relationship between sign and signified.
That's correct.
How would you explain that one could eventually recognize an Eisenman design? Can there be a common thread or a signature that slipped through the diagrams?
Well, first of all, I would say there is probably a way of identifying, even though I don't think so. I think that people would say, yeah, that's an Eisenman project. I mean, I'm certain the people who judged the Hamburg library saw that it was an Eisenman project. I think the common thread is there are common themes that I'm addressing. The relationship between figure and ground, the idea of an urbanism that is not a figure ground urbanism, that grows out of the site, let's say, that the volumetrics of my buildings are, ultimately they have certain characteristics which I'm interested in because of the ideas that I'm interested in. I'm interested in denying the difference between vertical and horizontal, between up and down, between left and right. So all of these things play in various ways into my buildings. And so therefore what look to be stylistic categories, which are not the same, are certainly idea categories and themes which are the same. So I would say it's like, can you recognize Picasso even though he painted in very many different periods? I would say yes, you can. I think that I go through many different stylistic periods, but you still can recognize one of my projects.
You have been writing and publishing maybe as many books and essays as you have built buildings. Do you see yourself more as an author or as an architect?
Well, first of all, I think they're the same thing. I think architects are authors, authors are architects. But for example, let's take Piranesi. Piranesi built one building and wrote hundreds of pages of essays and books and drawings and things. Nobody would ever ask that question to Piranesi. So I think the question is an invalid question. There's no, for me, my writing is my architecture. My buildings are my writing. I'm doing a book now. What is that? In Lehre geschrieben, right? So written into the void. That's exactly it. Writing and architecture are the same thing for me. So author and architect, there's no difference.
You work and live in New York. In this city, one encounters arguably all imaginable architectural styles in various combinations. How do you come to terms with that as an architect? Does it bother you?
Oh no, it would bother me if there weren't all those styles. I love the sort of the eclectic, decadent I wish there were all the different styles were better. I don't think we have many great buildings in New York. I mean, but there's no great city that doesn't reflect its time through its architecture. So I certainly think that I wouldn't want a city of Eisenman. I would run in horror from that. So no, I think it's great. I get great energy out of the difference, just like I get great energy of the difference in people. I get really nervous if I see all white blonde people, even though I may be attracted to white blonde women. I think a city full of them would be a little bit too much.
Do you think architecture is still in the face of modernism, or late or reflective modernism, or did postmodernism terminate modernism?
Well, first of all, I don't think the modernist project is finished, ever was realized or resolved in architecture. So that's still a project. If modernism means an attitude toward culture that deals with the scientific revolution, the problems of the digital age, for example. I mean, who is to say that the digital age as opposed to the analogic age is not modern? It's a modern phenomenon. When Borromini was building, he thought of his building as modern. Piranesi talked about the ancients and the moderns. So the modern project for me began with Piranesi, and I'm not about to say just because somebody says we're in postmodernism that the modernist project is over. I don't think it's been yet realized. What would that mean? I don't know.
Would you consider yourself being avant-garde? Is avant-garde still relevant or possible?
Well, to some people, I'm avant-garde. To the people who are on the conservative side of history, I seem like a radical. But to the people who deal with blobs and computer-generated images, I seem to be very conservative. So I have both faces. I think my attitude toward life is one of a critical attitude, and if a critical attitude is always challenging the status quo, challenging the cliche, challenging that's what is supposedly normal, then I would say I'm avant-garde. But in my daily life, I don't dress as an avant-garde. I don't live as an avant-garde. I live in a very ordinary situation. This office is very ordinary environment. I mean, I call it dumb. So I think that avant-garde depends on where the other person is. If the other person's to the right of me, I look avant-garde. If they're to the left of me, I look not avant-garde. So it's a relative term. But I think it's still a useful term in the sense that we need what I would call a critical avant-garde. That is a matrix of thought that questions what is assumed to be true. And this is what I think the assumption of truth has always to be questioned.
What do you think architecture can or should offer today?
I say architecture should constantly question truth. Architecture is not about solving problems, it's about creating problems, the awareness of problems. So architecture is always a cultural manifestation of culture. Where culture is at any one time, architecture is both a reflection and a mirror of that culture. And also challenges that, is a critique of that culture. So, but the one thing it doesn't do is solve problems, doesn't make people happy, it shouldn't make people feel comfortable. Those are the things I know that it shouldn't do. As far as the things that it should do, I'm still trying to work those out.
You have built or are building all kinds of projects, like residential and office buildings, museums, convention centers, a stadium, a memorial. Do you have any favorites among them? Is there something left you feel you really need to do?
Is there something I still need to do? Well, first of all, I don't look back and at my favorites. There's some projects that obviously are more what you'd call successful in what they attempted to do and how they did it. Somebody asked me, a rabbi said to me 2 weeks ago, I want someone to do a radical, sacred space of the 21st century. Now that, whether it's a Catholic church, a Christian denomination, a Jewish church, a temple, I think that's an interesting challenge. What would a sacred space be in a secular world? In a radical sacred space in a secular world? That would be a challenge. So that's one kind of challenge. I would like to do a tall building like the Max Reinhardt building. I would like to achieve an idea about tall buildings. I might like to do a prison. I'm not interested in doing projects that I've done. I might be interested in seeing if the problem of housing could be solved in an architecture. When I say solved, propose a different idea of housing, but I don't think that, look, I'm not going to solve the world's problems. The only problems I'm going to solve are my own, right? And that's why I do my work. It's a form of therapy.